Trell 9 didn't smell like peace. It smelled like ozone, antifreeze, and the sweat of soldiers who'd spent too long pretending they weren't afraid. The diplomatic zone, such as it was, had been cleared just enough for a temporary tent dome and a few atmospheric processors to keep the air breathable and the optics slightly less bleak. Captain Eli Mercer leaned against the wall of the prefabricated checkpoint, chewing on something that claimed to be mint gum, but had all the charm of recycled boot leather. He glanced at the approaching shuttle, a sleek Alari diplomatic vessel shaped like a stingray with trust issues. The guards stiffened. He didn't. His job wasn't to look pretty or tense. His job was to escort royalty across a planet that had more unexploded mines than functioning toilets. The shuttle hissed as it landed. A metallic sigh escaped its cooling vents, and the side hatch folded down with an elegant slowness Eli found unnecessarily dramatic. Out stepped the princess. She was tall, draped in iridescent silver fabric that shimmered in the dusty wind, and walked like someone who'd spent her life balancing politics and the unbearable weight of lineage. The long veil across her head fluttered just enough to hint at the elongated ears beneath, graceful curves that marked her as unmistakably Alari. Alien, regal, probably annoyed already. Eli squinted at her, offered a lazy salute, and said, "So, how do you feel about walking through a place where the ground might explode under your feet? Because that's what we call hospitality around here." Her eyes narrowed, icy and assessing. "Are you the one assigned to escort me?" "Captain Eli Mercer. Your guide, your bodyguard, your occasional translator, and your extremely reluctant conversational partner. If you ask nicely, I'll also complain about the food." She didn't smile. Not really. But there was a twitch at the corner of her mouth that might have been curiosity or indigestion. She stepped closer, and he noticed the slight hesitation in her stride, as if calculating the angle of her veil and the distance between them. "I assume you've been briefed on appropriate behavior when addressing Alari nobility." "I was told not to stare, not to touch, and definitely not to offer you Earth snacks." He reached into his vest and pulled out a small paper bag. "So naturally, I brought donuts. Smuggled from the last station before the ceasefire line. Fried, sugary, slightly radioactive, just how diplomacy likes it." She blinked. "Is this a human mating ritual?" He paused, considered. "Depends on the flavor. This one's jelly-filled, so yes." She accepted the bag like it was a bomb, sniffed it once, tucked it into the folds of her robe with a kind of resigned confusion. "Your customs are inefficient. You should see our politics." They started walking toward the perimeter, the guards falling into formation around them like cautious shadows. Kalira didn't speak again until they reached the first set of motion-triggered deterrents, a line of spider-like drones clicking irritably in the dust. "Are those sentient?" "Only if you're made of uranium. Otherwise, they just spit warnings and shine lights. We keep the sentient weapons for special occasions, like birthday parties and tax audits. Your civilization is unhinged." That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. As they passed the drones, the wind shifted, and her veil fluttered again. Eli saw the full shape of her ears for a moment, sweeping curves of skin, elegant and slightly translucent in the light. Beautiful in a strange way, not human, not even close. She adjusted the veil quickly, eyes forward, spine rigid. He didn't comment. He just whistled low and said, "Reminds me of a girl I dated in 0G. She had these gravity-adaptive tattoos. Gorgeous until they wrapped around her eyebrows and formed a QR code." She looked at him sideways. "And what did the code link to?" "An ad for self-help books. I never recovered." They reached the diplomatic compound's edge, a circular structure built from modular defense walls and automated watchtowers. It looked more like a bunker than a peace center. Kalira hesitated, scanning the entrance. "My father does not believe this summit will succeed," she said quietly. "He sees it as a gesture made under duress. Most good decisions are." "And you, what do you believe, Captain?" "I believe I should have taken a desk job on Europa. I believe your people have weird taste in architecture. And I believe, if this thing has even a 1% chance of not blowing up in our faces, it's worth pretending we're civilized for a few days. She tilted her head. You hide your thoughts behind humor. He shrugged. I hide everything behind humor, sometimes even other jokes. Inside the compound, the air changed. Cleaner, recycled, monitored. The walls were embedded with hollow screens displaying peaceful landscapes, earth forests, Ilari spire gardens, neutral zones rendered in soft lighting. None of it real. Kalira stopped in front of a projection of a Terran mountain range. Your planet is jagged. That's our charm. You think charm and danger are the same. No, but I think people tend to confuse the two when they're lonely. That earned a real pause. She glanced at him, and for the first time her voice softened. Why are you not afraid of me? Eli considered the question, then smiled like someone who'd already had the worst day of his life and survived it. Because you're not the scariest thing I've seen this week. That would be Sergeant Hennessy's feat after 6 days in combat boots. You mock even now. Constantly. But for what it's worth, Princess, I don't see anything worth fearing when I look at you. She turned back to the mountain. The veil shifted again, just enough for him to see the outline of her ear. This time, she didn't adjust it. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of distant generators and the soft flicker of synthetic wind in the projected trees. Finally, Eli cleared his throat. So, do Ilari have jokes? She considered it. There is a saying, only fools burn their own air. That's not a joke, that's a public safety warning. It's told with inflection. I'm gonna teach you a knock-knock joke. Prepare yourself. It's going to ruin diplomacy forever. She didn't laugh, but her eyes gleamed faintly. Very well, proceed. And in that absurd moment, surrounded by politics and pretense and the quiet hum of imminent war, something fragile and stupidly human began to grow between them. Something that didn't belong in a summit or a battlefield, but existed anyway. The explosion didn't come with warning. It came with a color, a violent greenish flash that looked like a chemical sneeze across the horizon, and then the kind of sound you didn't hear so much as feel in your molars. Eli hit the ground first, pulling Kalira down with him just before the shockwave blew the transparent ceiling of the compound into a hail of plastiglass shrapnel. Was that one of ours? He shouted over the ringing in his ears. Kalira didn't answer. She was checking a small device embedded in the seam of her sleeve, tapping symbols that glowed pale violet beneath her fingers. It was the Northern Shuttle, a diplomatic transport. Yours. Great, we just bombed ourselves. That's the kind of self-sabotage I expect from a summit catered by the same folks who designed the Terran tax system. Alarms were blaring now, sharp pulses in multiple languages, warning of breaches, fire, seismic instability, and probable death. A nearby support column creaked ominously. Above them, the upper tiers of the dome began to shift, metal groaning like it had questions no one could answer. Eli grabbed Kalira's arm. We have to move. Emergency tunnel S below the main floor. Can you walk, Princess? I have survived decompression at the edge of the Muralin vortex. I can manage a corridor collapse. Noted, add that to your dating profile. The ground tilted slightly as a secondary explosion rumbled through the substructure. Eli led her to a maintenance hatch half hidden behind a false panel, yanked the override crank, and dropped down into a narrow access shaft that smelled like ozone, sweat, and disappointment. Kalira followed without a word, gliding more than climbing, her balance eerily perfect despite the tremors. Once inside, he sealed the hatch. The lights flickered, then stabilized into an amber glow that made everything look like a crime scene from a low-budget detective show. Well, Eli said, panting, this is cozy. Kalira scanned the corridor. It's a single-line utility duct, 2 kilometers long, no diverging paths, efficient for evacuation, inefficient for dignity. I'm human. We abandoned dignity somewhere, around the invention of reality television. They moved quickly, Eli taking point, Kalira behind him. Occasionally, her fingers brushed the corridor's sensor panels, activating silent diagnostics. "Someone compromised your defense grid," she murmured. "This wasn't a random strike." "Yeah, I got that from the 'we exploded ourselves' part. You think it was your people. My people don't assassinate in such a loud, inefficient fashion. Yours, however." He sighed. "I'll have you know, loud and inefficient is basically humanity's brand." The corridor twisted once, then dipped into a deeper layer. Eli paused to catch his breath and pulled out a small pack of ration sticks. Protein. Flavor profile, regret and peanut. Kalira accepted one with what might have been royal skepticism. She took a cautious bite, chewed. "This tastes like synthetic boot polish." "That's because it is synthetic boot polish. The peanut's just for legal reasons. You eat this willingly." "Define willingly." They walked in silence for a few minutes, broken only by the soft hum of backup power and the occasional metallic creak overhead. Then Kalira spoke, voice low. "Why did you not react to my ears?" Eli blinked. "What?" "When the veil slipped, you saw them." "Yeah, and you didn't stare, or flinch, or look away politely, while internally cataloging my genetic differences like some xenobiologist with a foot fetish. Look, I've seen ears. Pointy, round, flat, fuzzy. Yours look fine, elegant. You're stressing over ears. I have one foot shorter than the other and a freckle shaped like a potato on my hip. We all have something." "That's not the same." "Why not?" "Because I'm a Lowry. Our features are coded into status. Deviations are undesirable." "Well, on Earth we elect people with comb-overs and orange skin to positions of power. So let's not throw stones." Her expression twitched. "You're impossible. And you're weirdly hung up on ears for someone who just survived a bombing." Another silence, but warmer this time, the kind that carried weight without dragging them under it. They turned a final corner, arriving at a sealed blast door. Eli tapped the console. Nothing. The manual override was jammed. Figures. Kalira stepped forward, pressed both palms to the panel. Her fingers emitted a brief pulse of ultraviolet light. The door hissed once, then unlocked. Eli blinked. "How'd you?" "I am not merely decorative. I never said you were. I just assumed your superpowers were limited to gliding around in fancy robes and judging my snack choices." They passed through the door into a wider chamber, some kind of old relay hub, half stripped for parts. Exposed wiring snaked across the walls, and one console buzzed softly as if trying to remember its purpose. Eli slid down against the wall with a groan. "We wait here. Rescue protocols will kick in eventually. Or we'll be buried under diplomatic rubble." Ever the optimist, Kalira sat across from him, studying his face with an intensity that made him slightly nervous. "You joke constantly." "Yeah, even now. Especially now." "Why?" He shrugged. "Keeps the panic from leaking out my ears." "You are afraid." "Only of three things: dentists, clowns, and the day coffee runs out. Everything else, manageable." She tilted her head. "You're strange." "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. I took it as one anyway." She looked down, fiddling with a data band on her wrist. "Do humans value physical beauty? We value anything we can sell, exploit, or romanticize in bad poetry. And what is considered beautiful? Well, symmetry, clear skin, interesting eyes, strong jawlines, no extra limbs. Pretty subjective, honestly." She hesitated. "Would I be considered beautiful by your people?" He stared at her for a long moment. Not the kind that searched for the right words, but the kind that measured the distance between two truths. Then he smiled. Not a smirk, not a quip. Just a quiet, small smile that reached the corners of his face without effort. "You're asking the wrong question." "What's the right one? Why do you think you're not?" She didn't answer, just looked at him with something unreadable in her gaze. Then softly, "Because no one ever told me I was." He nodded. "Then they're idiots." They sat there, under the flickering light of a dying relay station on a nearly dead planet. surrounded by broken systems and unstable alliances, waiting for rescue or further catastrophe. And for once, neither of them spoke. The relay station opened its ancient, rusted maw with a groan like a dying walrus, which, according to Eli, was an actual combat sound used by one of Earth's extinct marine species. Kalira didn't believe him, but she let the comment slide as they stepped out into the collapsed ruins of the old city's outer district. Ruins, as it turned out, were significantly less romantic when you had to climb over broken sanitation ducts and dodge auto-targeting scavenger bots. The corridor behind them sealed with a final thud, locking them out from the diplomatic zone, and in with whatever abandoned tech now considered itself king of the wasteland. So, Eli said, kicking aside a bent security drone that chirped in protest before dying again. On a scale from bad date to galactic diplomatic crisis, how would you rate today? Somewhere between toxic courtship ritual and species-wide embarrassment, Kalira replied without missing a beat. They navigated around a melted kiosk whose screen still blinked, free intergalactic Wi-Fi, like a ghost trying to give out coupons. Kalira adjusted the settings on her wrist console. I'm triangulating safe zones. Most structures ahead show instability. However, there's a signal beacon with residual accord transponder tones, half a kilometer southeast. Great. Let's head toward the thing that might not explode. That's already a step up from my last 3 birthdays. As they moved, the shadows lengthened, not due to any planetary sun, but because the artificial sky dome above the city flickered into night mode. Somewhere deep within the failing systems of Trell 9, a subroutine decided it was time for mood lighting. Your planet simulates night cycles in a war zone. Technically not my planet. But yeah, apparently someone in the admin team thought setting the mood would improve morale. I find it irrational. That's because you've never kissed someone under a sky dome while a vending machine plays jazz. I never will if this mission fails. Don't worry. If we die out here, I promise to make it romantic, tragic, maybe a little. That is an ancient cultural. Exactly. And our ancestors just really hated being thirsty and unarmed. Kalira dropped the can. It floated off again, making a soft hissing sound as it tried to decide whether to detonate or deflate. When they finally reached the signal beacon, it was half buried in rubble and pulsing a weak green rhythm. Eli knelt beside it, wiping off dust and scanning its interface. Looks like an Accord emergency node. Short-range transmission only. Might reach an orbiting drone if we're lucky. Define lucky. Still breathing, not glowing. No limbs replaced by alien fungus, that kind of thing. Kalira looked up. Sky drone ping detected, altitude 30 clicks. Relay window opening in 1 minute. They waited. The silence buzzed, filled with the distant whir of scavenger mechs and the occasional spark of power lines trying desperately to stay relevant. Eli leaned against the beacon. So, weird question. Were you always going to be a princess, or did you lose a bet? It is my birthright. I was selected genetically. Our monarchy is not determined by random chance or ritual combat, unlike some human systems. You'd be surprised how many elections come down to ritual combat. We just call them debates. Kalira glanced sideways. You make jokes instead of asking real questions. That was a real question, I'm curious. What if you weren't royalty? What would you be? She hesitated. I would have studied neural architecture, Ilari thought sculpting, reshaping emotion through synthetic memory interfaces. Sounds like building dreams from spare parts. In a way. I tried to build a dream once. Bought a used zero-G hammock and a box of protein bars. Didn't work out. Turns out dreams need a heating unit. She smiled faintly. You're very inefficient. Thank you, I work hard at it. The beacon pinged. Transmission opened. Kalira sent a pulse coded for non-priority diplomatic clearance. Eli crossed his fingers. Come on, signal gods, give us a miracle or at least a working voicemail. The console blinked. Transmission acknowledged. Response ETA unknown. Well, he said, could be worse. Could it? Yeah, we could be stuck here with only each other to talk to. She paused. That is the current situation. Exactly. See, perspective. A mechanical whir broke the moment. From the upper scaffold of the ruined station, a slender reconnaissance drone descended, spherical, with a long optic sensor and retractable claws. It hovered, beeped once, and projected a symbol. Alari military crest. Kalira stiffened. It's a retrieval unit from my fleet. That good or bad? They don't usually send recon without support. This is covert. They're not broadcasting to the Accord. They're broadcasting to me. Eli stepped forward, one hand on his weapon. Why would your people hide your retrieval? Her eyes narrowed. Because someone doesn't want me at the summit anymore. So we've got rogue humans blowing up shuttles, and now secret Alari pickups. Great, next thing you'll tell me, the vending machines are in on it. I'm not ruling it out. The drone chirped again, opening a data stream. A projected route appeared, coordinates to a rendezvous point far from the summit zone. Kalira looked at Eli. They expect me to go alone. And are you? She didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back and slowly, deliberately crushed the beacon with her boot. The transmission died. The drone spun twice, confused, and then zipped away into the night. Eli raised an eyebrow. You just ghosted your own military. I didn't like the tone of their invitation. He laughed, half in disbelief. You're becoming dangerously human. She turned to him, solemn. I stayed because I trust you. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He nodded, usually the second one, but hey, it's how friendships start. She looked around at the dead city, the artificial stars blinking overhead, the silence holding its breath. Then let's see where it goes. The orbital lift was technically condemned, which in Terran terms meant it had only exploded twice and was mostly unguarded. Its lower section sat crumbling in a crater carved by an ancient skirmish, while the upper tower reached toward the edge of atmosphere like it still remembered its purpose. Eli stood beneath its rusted frame, craning his neck up with a mix of admiration and mild existential dread. I can't decide if this thing looks more like a technological miracle or a really bad idea on stilts. Kalira stood beside him, scanning the tower's access systems. The structure's integrity is compromised, but the emergency relay console is likely intact at altitude. So we're climbing it. We're taking the gravity tether, assuming it still functions. Eli looked at the control pad. That's a big assumption. I prefer optimism when physics are involved. That explains a lot about your people. The lift's old tether system hummed reluctantly as Kalira activated it with a combination of Alari code and a gentle elbow to the override panel. With a lurch and a noise that sounded suspiciously like a flatulent whale, the platform engaged and began to rise. Eli gripped the rail. Smooth start. I give it a 6 for grace but a 10 for sound effects. Kalira said nothing, her focus on the control interface, fingers dancing across archaic symbols. The platform vibrated underfoot, rattling bolts and echoing with the faint memory of long-dead passengers. At 50 meters, the city below shrank to a tangle of metallic veins. At 100, the stars, fake and real, blurred together. You know, Eli said, in another life this would have been romantic. In another life, I would have arrested you for war crimes. Still might, depends how this date ends. She gave him a look that was probably meant to be disapproving, but fell somewhere between intrigued and exhausted. You joke constantly. I told you it's a defense mechanism. Helps me cope with trauma and diplomatic food. Kalira sat, legs crossed as the lift ascended. Tell me something honest without humor. Okay, he paused. I think we're in trouble. That's obvious. I think I like being in trouble with you. That earned a blink, just one. But in Kalira's world it was practically a confession. When they reached the tower's midpoint, the platform jerked to a halt. Lights flickered. A warning message scrolled across the console in 3 languages, 2 of which hadn't been spoken for centuries. Eli sighed. System failure. No, the system thinks we've exceeded weight limits. He raised an eyebrow. Are you calling me heavy? I'm calling this machine biased against muscular density. Flattery will get you everywhere. Kalira accessed the relay manually, rerouting power from a still operational auxiliary coil. Sparks danced across the console like nervous insects, but the platform groaned and continued climbing. Higher now. The curvature of Trell 9 horizon became visible through the fractured window slits. The stars above shifted slightly, subtle movements, orbital drift patterns, satellites blinking coded pulses. Pick up anything useful? Eli asked. Kalira adjusted her comm band. Encrypted transmissions, human and Alari both. Someone's jamming diplomatic frequencies and rerouting shuttle logs. They're masking the sabotage. So no one knows we're missing. No one important. Great, now we're off the map and expendable. Welcome to interspecies diplomacy. They reached the observation ring. It had once been a hub for tourists and engineers, now abandoned and dusty, cables dangling like forgotten limbs. Kalira found the primary node and began syncing her wrist interface. Eli stood beside a viewport, watching space stretch its jaws beyond the glass. Do you think your people expected you to disappear? They expected me to obey. That's not really your thing, is it? It never was. But it's easier to conform when you believe you have no other choice. He nodded. Yeah, been there. She looked up. What changed for you? I met someone who said I was worth more than the uniform I wore. Kalira's fingers slowed. Were they right? I'm still deciding. She studied him. What do you see when you look at me? Someone trying very hard not to ask the same question. He walked over, leaned against the console beside her. Why do you think I'm here? Because you're reckless. That too. Because you enjoy danger. Not as much as I enjoy pissing off people who think I don't belong. Then why? Because you looked at me like I wasn't just a soldier. And I looked at you like you weren't just a symbol. She met his gaze. I am not beautiful by Alari standards. Yeah, you said that already. Then why? Because it's not about standards. It's about the way you don't flinch when things fall apart, the way you listen, the way you keep going even when you're scared. I don't feel strong. Neither do I, but you don't have to feel strong to be strong. She turned away, voice quiet. I'm afraid. Me too, let's be afraid together. The console chirped. Connection established. The node began uploading emergency data bursts to the remaining satellites above. A soft tone indicated partial success. Kalira stared at the blinking light. We might be able to broadcast a wideband distress signal, but once we do, they'll know where we are. Then let's make it count. They began composing the message: truths, coordinates, diplomatic betrayal. They listed names, coded identifiers, silent warnings to anyone listening. It was part confession, part declaration. When it was done, Kalira hesitated. Once we send this, we become targets. Then I hope they send someone interesting. She sent the message. The lights dimmed as power surged outward into the sky, into the network still clinging to life above Trell 9. Silence returned. Eli leaned back. So, if we survive this dinner? Kalira raised an eyebrow. As allies. As conspirators. I'll consider it, if you survive long enough to be annoying again. I'm annoyingly persistent. I've noticed. Outside something moved. A small ship no larger than a cargo drone breaking orbit, unmarked, fast, heading toward them. Kalira looked up. Someone's coming. Eli cracked his knuckles. Let's hope they brought snacks. The unmarked ship touched down without fanfare, settling against the tower's docking ring with a hiss of stabilizers and a low mechanical sigh, like it was just as tired of conspiracies as they were. Eli kept his hand close to his sidearm, though mostly out of habit. Kalira didn't move. Her eyes tracked the vessel's hatch, her body still but charged, like language waiting for punctuation. The ramp descended. A pair of figures stepped out, one Alari, one human. Both wore insignia stripped of rank, both armed with negotiation tablets and sidearms. The Ilari's ears bore a ceremonial scar, a mark of royal betrayal. The human was chewing gum like the fate of diplomacy depended on his jaw strength. "Ambassador Kalira," the Ilari said, bowing with only 2 fingers to the heart, "we received your signal. Some of us still believe in peace. Others think it's easier to shoot first." "That makes 3 of us," Eli muttered. "Captain Mercer," the human added, eyes sweeping over him. "Your commanding officer is very curious how you ended up on an abandoned orbital relay with a classified foreign dignitary and 3 separate violations of interspecies contact protocols." "I offered her a donut. Everything went downhill from there." "Sounds about right." They were taken aboard. The interior of the ship was tight, retrofitted with more surveillance blockers than weapons. Once secured, the comms officer pulsed the full transmission burst, Kalira's message, raw and unsanitized, to the Accord, and the separate Ilari and human delegations still recovering from the sabotage fallout. A silence followed. Then waves of encrypted confirmations, some signals friendly, some less so. "They'll come for us now," Kalira said, arms crossed. "Both sides, not officially of course, just enough to make us disappear." "Not the first time someone wanted me to vanish," Eli replied. "Usually it's over parking violations. You'll be branded a traitor." He shrugged, better than being branded boring. They didn't sleep. They didn't need to. Adrenaline did the work. Hours passed in coded updates and tight negotiations, Kalira giving testimony over secure feeds, Eli verifying attack logs and drone interference. The traitorous factions were named. Investigations began. Retaliations threatened. The key difference, now it was public, visible, loud. No one could hide behind silence anymore. When the dust settled, they were not arrested, not quite honored either. The Ilari court stripped Kalira of title but not of access. She was offered a new post, Ambassador Emerita to the Galactic Accord, a title that sounded both vague and mildly sarcastic, which suited her fine. Eli was promoted sideways, given a desk job with field consulting privileges, which he interpreted as permission to go where he pleased, provided he didn't blow anything up on purpose. At the farewell docking terminal on Accord Prime,